definitely touch on it. So we got to talk about Mr. Tua. I put out a short today about the situation, and let's be honest, this was something that has been down the pipeline for a while now. You guys, check the channel. I did a video about Tua a while ago. Um, I talked about Tua last year when they paid him in Trevor Lawrence. Now, Trevor Lawrence credit, my man looked good Sunday. 6 total touchdowns, 5 passing touchdowns. But what's evident is that these quarterbacks, when you're somebody like Tua, who got 4 years, $212 million, you got to deliver, and he just hasn't delivered. You know what I mean? Simple as that. He has not been the guy that the Miami Dolphins paid for. Um, I was already hesitant, and like I wasn't big on Tua even when he came out of school. But once he started getting all those concussions and all that stuff, anyway, I was already hesitant on paying him that type of money because the school, when he's on that rookie contract or you got him on a franchise tag, but when you got to make that commitment, that's a whole totally different story. And that's definitely a situation um, that the Dolphins got themselves in. And as it looks, Mike McDaniel's at this point now, he's trying to save his job. So, it's a situation where he got to cut bait. So now we have Quinn Ewers that is starting. And a lot of people was high on Quinn Ewers. I thought Quinn Ewers was actually going to be pretty good. He originally was recruited by Ohio State, ended up going to Ohio State. Of course, he couldn't get on the field at Ohio State. So, he went over to Texas. And, yeah, he kind of didn't live up to the hype of Texas or whatever the case may be. But he played good enough football to get them to dance in the college football playoffs. So he played decently well. You know what I mean? He just didn't live up to the hype that they put on his name. And, of course, he slid down the draft boards. He was looked at as a first-round pick for sure. And he slid down the boards, but I think the perfect fit was with a Mike McDaniel. And I had him or Shador going to Miami at that time when the draft hit because I thought they were perfect fits for that system. And, Quinn is a big guy. He's a big guy. He's like 6'2", 6'3". He's mobile, so, you ain't got to worry about balls getting batted down and those type of things. And if he can be developed into that guy, you got, 3 more games, to let him play? I think it was the perfect time to pull Tua. I think it was the perfect time to pull Tua. Now, I talked about this earlier today when I put out the short, just to give you guys the numbers on Tua's cap hit. So, hold your seats for this one. His dead money hits if Tua is moved in the offseason. If he's cut pre-June 1st, he will have a $99.2 million draft cap hit. Dead money. Cut post-June 1st is $67.4 million in dead money. And if he gets traded, they're still on the hook. The Dolphins, that is. They're still on the hook for $45 million. And he's already had $54 million of his salary guaranteed. And see, this is the conversation that needs to be had here. Just because your quarterback can put up decent numbers doesn't mean that he's a franchise guy. And I think this is going to be a thing that goes forward. A lot of these guys are not franchise guys that you can really, really build a team around. And if, the situation isn't perfect, they could make something out of nothing. AKA Lamar Jackson. Well, I'm not even going to say Lamar Jackson because he's been kind of disappointing this year. But I'm going to say Josh Allen for sure. We see the weapons that Josh Allen has in Buffalo. There's no number one. James Cook is coming into his own. He has been a vital part of that offense. But when you got who's on that team? Mac Hollins, Who else? Kenyon Coleman has not been the guy that everybody's looking for him to be. Shakir is a nice receiver, but he's not a number one. You know, you got Dalton Kincaid, but they are more of a band of misfits more than really starting number one all pro type of receivers. And Josh Allen just goes out every week and he does the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. He's carried this Chiefs team the last 2 years. The weapons have been at best. You know, they're not a good team, but he's carried them. He's put them in the playoff race, carried them to a Super Bowl, and they made it work with what they had. So that's two top tier quarterbacks. Um, you know, maybe Lamar Jackson, even before they started getting weapons for Lamar was kind of carrying the team. Now Joe Burrow has had weapons, but I do believe if Joe went anywhere else, as long as they got balance to the offense, he would be able to carry an offense with lesser weapons. So that's maybe 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. To me, Tua was along the lines of Jalen Hurts. Now, has Jalen Hurts won the big games? Yes. Has he shown up when it's mattered? Yes, he has. But he has limitations to his game. And I thought that with Tua then. And then when you add on the concussions and everything else, he was not a franchise quarterback. And I think these owners and these GMs got pressured into signing these guys because they said, hey, if we don't sign these guys, you know, we're not going to find nobody else. And then we going to be in purgatory. Well, you signed Tua to a contract extension. How does it look? Now you're on the hook for all this money, and you're not going to be able to bring another starting caliber quarterback in. Even if you trade Tua tomorrow, you're still on the hook for almost $50 million in dead cap. So how are you going to pay him and pay newer say at quarterback? That's a situation that NFL teams are going through at this point now because everybody ran to overpay their quarterback. Is your quarterback worth $50 million a year? Is it worth 55? Is it worth 60? I mean, you even look at Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott he's had a great year for all intents and purposes, numbers wise. But Dallas only has 1% chance of making the playoffs. So more than likely, they're not going to make it. But yet, Dak is being paid $60 million. Do I like Dak? I am actually a fan of Dak Prescott. But he's not a quarterback that can move mountains. And if I am the owner group going into next CBA, we're going to have to tear off these quarterbacks, put them in tiers. Because Josh Allen is worth $60 million. Patrick Mahomes is worth $60 million. Maybe a Joe Burrow, maybe a Lamar Jackson, maybe. But who else is worth that type of money? And now Miami's stuck in a situation where they're going to have to draft their next guy. Maybe put him in right away. Maybe Quinn Ewers is the guy. You hope you get something that shows real potential with Quinn. And you can take that pick or wherever they get picked at, maybe you can package it up and move some things around. Now they're talking about trading Jalen Waddle. So now if you're talking about trading Waddle, you're into a full reset because you just paid him an exorbitant amount of money. See, when you start paying these guys like that, you're paying them to go win games. Not to not make playoffs and things of that nature. So they're in a situation. And we're going to pull up Mr. Tyreek Hill, who showed his response to Tua being benched. So we definitely got to pull that up here. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Let's listen to the Ross Tucker podcast because he had Andrew Brandt on. Let's take a look to this. This is something that's worth listening to too. Share screen. We getting good at this. We getting good at this. All right. Okay, so let's listen to Andrew Brandt here.
They're paying him with an offset, I guess, if they cut him and he goes somewhere else, but they're not cutting him. And this is why they're not cutting him. Because cap-wise, it's cheaper to keep him. You can't take $99 million of dead money. Now, listen, I get it. You're saying to me, Andrew, you said that about Russell Wilson. Absolutely, I did. And 4 years ago, I said that about Carson Wentz with $34 million of dead money. But I just don't see 99. $99.2 million of dead money if they cut him. Now, that's before June 1. Now, if they go into this cockamamie situation where they cut him after June 1 and somehow he's hanging around somewhere between now and June 1, they're still getting 67.2 on their cap in 2026, right? 67.2 million, which again would be the highest cap number, let alone the Dolphins, the league. And 31.8 million in 2027. Yes, this is a mess. This is a mess. We got a long way to see what they're going to do. My best guess at this time, and just a guesstimate as we sit here on December 17th, 2025, he'll be there and take a pay cut. Why would he take a pay cut? Well, he and Athletes First would survey the market and say, we're not going to make $54 million, but maybe we could make $30 million. I don't know. But what the Athletes First has is the full guarantee if he's cut. So they can dare the Miami Dolphins to cut him and take $99 million cap expense, or $67 million in 1 year and $31 million the next year. Tua's in great shape. Like Tua, what are they going to do? They're going to cut him and.
So if you guys want to listen to the rest of that, Ross Tucker's podcast show, really good show. That was Andrew Brandt. And you guys see the situation right there. Now, if I am a GM and I saw the Russell Wilson situation, I saw the Tua situation, I saw the Deshaun Watson situation in Cleveland, I'm not running to pay a quarterback. You better know that you have the guy and that he's going to be your guy and that he's not schemed up to be great. That he's great when adversity shows, when he has to adapt, when he has to make moves on the fly. He's that type of guy. If he's not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or any of those guys that I listed earlier, please do not give your quarterback $50 million. You just heard Andrew Brandt say it. Guess who's the winner in that situation? Tua. Because he already has so much guaranteed money. He don't mind going to sit on the bench. You have to pay him anyway. You got to pay him a lot of money. So Andrew Brandt, who was with the Green Bay Packers, GM, all of that stuff. Well, he wasn't the GM, but he was like a president or something like that. He understands the money and the finances. And if you're hearing that as an owner and your quarterback is coming up for a contract extension and you're not sure about him, you think that he's just good enough based on the parts and pieces that you put around him, you better franchise tag him. And I think an even more radical ideal is if you really, really in your hearts of heart don't believe in this guy, you may need to trade him because if another team is interested in him and they feel like he can be that guy somewhere else, then you got to do it. Now, when you look at the situation in the context of the Minnesota Vikings, they got Sam Darnold. They recreated Sam Darnold, turned him into a monster in Minnesota. And me personally, that was a situation where you should have kept Sam Darnold because Sam Darnold only wanted $35 million or $37 million. Whatever he got in Seattle was around what he was supposed to get as a Minnesota Viking, but they didn't want to agree to the years. So they let him go. Now, that's a situation I felt they should have kept Sam Darnold over J.J. McCarthy. Now, we'll see how J.J. McCarthy develops. It's been a rough go for him these first year and a half. Some games he looked really good. Some games he looked awful. But maybe they felt like they got their guy. But when you look at that situation, Minnesota made that move because they felt like he's a product of the scheme. So if the scheme falls apart, they probably felt like Sam Darnold wasn't a value. Now, did they miss on it? So far, it looks like they did. But I would go about evaluating my quarterback the same way Minnesota did. Whether to me they got it wrong, but I would do that too. Even when you look at the Tua situation, Tua hadn't got them to an AFC Championship game. He didn't do anything that made the Miami Dolphins stand out. It was the pieces and parts around him. You had the Jonnu Smiths, you had the Mike Gesicki's down there, you had Tyreek Hill, who had just came from winning the Super Bowl with the Chiefs when they traded for him. Then you drafted Jalen Waddle. Then you had Raheem Mostert down there. Now you got Arcane running. He had a lot of weapons down there. And then you had a who they look at as an offensive prodigy in Mike McDaniel. So everything was schemed up for Tua. And I can understand Mike McDaniel at that point in time having an affinity for Tua. You could go look at all the old interviews. He was in Tua's corner. He was, no doubt about it. But if I was the GM of the Miami Dolphins at that time, Chris Greer, I would not have paid. I wouldn't have paid Tua. Just off the concussions alone, I wouldn't have paid him. But his game just does not translate into being a getting paid franchise type of money. That was never his game. His game was predicated on the scheme and what he had around him. And that was a fireable offense, in my opinion, anyway. That was a fireable offense. And I could see it from the other side, ownership saying, hey, we got a guy, and we haven't had a guy in a while. We got to make sure we pay him, even if we overpay him. I just don't think that was a good idea. I don't think that was something that you could go look at and you could go say, hey, this guy is going to take us to beat Patrick Mahomes in an AFC championship. Do you believe a Tua can beat a Josh Allen in a playoff game, a Joe Burrow in a playoff game, if they can ever get to the playoffs? Lamar Jackson. I never saw it. I never saw it. So now they're in a situation. We'll see what happens next. Like they still have to figure out who is going to be their full-time GM going forward. Hell, does Mike McDaniel even keep his job? Does Mike McDaniel keep his job going into 2026? Because that team looked lifeless for the longest. And it kind of came back to life these last 4 or 5 games, and they played hard. But, when you spend all that type of money in that Dolphins organization and there's nothing to show for it, what's the point? What's the point? So I think going forward, I think all these NFL teams at this point now, you're going to have to figure out, is this really a franchise guy or is he really good in your system? Because when you don't get that quarterback position right, you have now hamstrung your team for probably another 3 or 4 years. They better hope they hit on Quinn Ewers or whoever they draft. Maybe they draft somebody where, you have the highest paid backup in football next to Kirk Cousins and Deshaun Watson. But they have to hit on these guys. They don't hit on them. If you're a Dolphins fan, I feel for you. I ain't never seen a Dolphin drown, but this might be the first time. So we'll keep monitoring that situation. But I don't even think I showed you guys the Tyreek Hill post. Let's let me show it. Let's see. All right, here go the Tyreek Hill post. Let's pull that up real quick. My man said peace. So he's saying even he had an ACL injury, but he's saying that he won't be back at Miami next year. So at least that's what it seems from the post. Now you can be cryptic, and Tyree Hill can come out and say that ain't even what I said. Well, the post say what it say, man. The post say what it say. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with the old Miami Dolphins here. But next person.